What if the most stubborn patterns in life, panic at water, attraction to the same impossible love, an unexplainable ache in the left shoulder every winter, aren't random at all? What if they're echoes from lives already lived, tugging at this one until they're finally resolved? This isn't a metaphor. This is what I learned during exactly 6 minutes and 21 seconds when my heart stopped in an ICU and a cosmic librarian opened a vault of memory that didn't just belong to me, yet felt more me than anything I've ever remembered. Subscribe now if questions about destiny, déjà vu, soulmates, and karma have ever kept you up at night. What follows is not dogma. It's a field report from the space between life and death. Breathe. This story only makes sense if the nervous system is steady. ICU, Phoenix Memorial, 2:17 a.m., a Tuesday with no name. My name is Elena Cruz, 34, Latina American, ER nurse at Phoenix Memorial, 10 years on nights, specialized in trauma and septic shock. In this building, I have watched hearts restart and hands go limp, mothers bargain with a God they weren't speaking to yesterday, and stoic fathers collapse on satin waiting room chairs. I'm pragmatic. Vitals don't lie, monitors don't have feelings, and sentiment doesn't push norepinephrine. 2 weeks before it happened, I made a mistake a seasoned nurse shouldn't make. Night shift, understaffed, a confused patient with end-stage liver disease thrashed during a blood draw. Needle stick through the glove, deep enough to feel the insult in the bone. We did everything by the book, post-exposure protocol, labs, prophylaxis. I shrugged it off. We keep moving. We always keep moving. 48 hours later, fever, 102, rigor that rattled my teeth. On day 3, my blood pressure tanked while I was charting at the nurse's station. I came to with my head in Sophia's lap. Sophia, my charge nurse with knuckles like a boxer, while someone pushed a cart at a sprint. My vein found a 16 gauge on the first try. Someone hung vancomycin and piperacillin tazobactam like a NASCAR pit crew, and I was the patient now. Septic shock is a betrayal. Your immune system flips the chessboard, floods the body with chaos, and the capillaries leak until there's no pressure in the pipes. Even lying flat, the ceiling pulsed in and out like a diaphragm. Voices around me turned to underwater vowels. Someone said, "Map is 53, we need more presses." Someone else, "She's bradying down." In the pocket between one heartbeat and the next, everything stopped. Silence is not the right word. When the monitor flatlines in a room like that, it makes a sound like a microwave on mute, an absence that swallows the senses. The team moved with the ritual precision I had drilled into interns 1,000 times. Pads on chest, epinephrine, charged to 200, clear. But I wasn't in the bed. I was 6 feet above my body, looking down at myself with clinical curiosity and the strangest compassion, like watching a child sleep in a car seat. I saw the pen I kept tucked behind my ear tumble onto the rail. I noticed Sophia's left shoelace was untied, a thing I would tease her about every night. I saw the code cart drawer stick on the third yank because the lock was slightly bent. The clock on the wall read 2:21 a.m. and a second hand that jerked instead of sweeping. These details mattered later. They were anchors, proof that whatever this was, it wasn't a hallucination assembling itself from my own memories. Then something changed behind me. The room receded without moving, like an escalator going backward while I stood still. The fluorescent glare dissolved into a darkness that wasn't empty. It was textured, starless, but alive, like velvet humming at the edge of hearing. A light appeared, not bright, not blinding, more like the way the air over desert asphalt shimmers at noon, molecular-level radiance. It gathered itself into a shape both human and entirely other. 7 feet tall if height means anything where there is no floor, facets like cut crystal in motion, eyes that were not eyes but windows into a library where galaxies shelved themselves. "I am Orpheon," it communicated without language. The meaning slipped into my awareness whole like a memory returning. Librarian of lifelines, keeper of echoes. I wanted to laugh. Librarian? Really? I was clinically dead and my guide was a cosmic Dewey Decimal System? But something in the word librarian soothed me. In ER chaos, Librarians are the ones who can find the one document that will save you. You are between, Orpheon conveyed. You called this place once in your belly at 4 years old when you almost drowned. You called it again at 12 when the red truck spun across the lane in Sonora and stopped 2 inches from your mother's door. You have always known the seam. I remembered both moments, memories I'd never told anyone because they felt like cheating at reality. The seam, the thin place. What is this? I asked, though I hadn't moved my mouth. Am I dead? Not yet. Your body is paused. You are not your body, Elena. You are attention. You are will. You are the thread that runs through the beads. Beads. Orpheon turned, and the darkness unfurled into a geometry I have tried 100 times to describe and failed. It was like a river made of moments, but also a staircase, but also a tree. Each branch a life, each leaf a choice, veins of light crisscrossing until there was no part unconnected to another. Memory is layered, Orpheon said, as if reciting a principle. Personal, ancestral, species, and the one beneath and above all, the soul layer. You came to touch the soul layer because you asked for it, even when you thought you didn't believe. Tonight, your question outran your fear. What question? Why does the same pain keep finding you in new costumes? My throat constricted with recognition. That was my private curse list, the one I never said aloud because nurses don't whine. Why the same kind of man, charisma, a little broken, needs fixing, kept showing up? Why since childhood bathtubs made me dizzy with dread? Why my left shoulder screamed every winter as if someone had tied a belt around it and yanked up hard, the pain old and precise? Why I could palpate a vein blind with 2 fingers and 1 breath as if I had been taught by the river itself. Show me, I said. It wasn't bravery, it was exhaustion. I was tired of running from things that had my footprints embedded in them. Orpheon lifted a hand that wasn't a hand. The darkness split, not into light, but into clarity. Picture a museum where each painting is one of your lives, and a docent knows exactly which rooms to visit to explain the current exhibit. That, but alive. Room 1, The River Midwife, Savannah, 1864. Heat pressed like a palm on the back of the neck. Spanish moss dripped from live oaks like lace curtains. I was 26, my hands stained with the iron half-moons of other women's blood. My name was Maeve O'Rourke, an Irish midwife who'd followed her older sister to a land that promised wages and delivered hunger and heat. I could feel the muscles in my forearms tight as ropes, the ache in my left shoulder where, when I was 14, a drunken overseer had dislocated it, grabbing me by the arm for being too slow with his wife's basin. It never healed right. In winter damp it throbbed, a pain like a coin under the skin. I had the habit of tying a cloth around it to keep it warm, and sometimes in July I wore that cloth anyway, as if the body remembers the season of its most significant injury and repeats it on the anniversary. I was good. No, I was fierce. I could turn a breach with my eyes shut, murmur a woman's fear down from the rafters, feel with 2 fingers the cord the way a fisherman can tell by a tug the fish on the line. I learned to find a vein in the dark with one touch when I stayed up nights with fevered children, boiling river water, steeping willow bark, humming names for each heartbeat so the brain would not forget that bodies have rhythm. A man came into my life who smelled like storm and paint thinner. His name was Thomas. He was beautiful in the way ruined cathedrals are beautiful, crumbled and holy. He did not love me. He worshipped me the way drowning men worship the idea of land. That is not love. That is terror with its name shaved. He drank. I thought I could fix it. The river had taught me to coax babies from the dark with my voice. Surely I could coax a man back from the mouth of his bottle. He did not hit me once. When I told him to leave, he stood on the dock and begged as if his bones were made of bees. I let him stay. He cost me 3 mothers. They would have died anyway, someone said later, because war doesn't care about lungs. But I knew the simple math of attention. A midwife can be in 2 places at once. Her hands here, her mind on the breath across the room, but she cannot be in 3. He was 1 place too many. Why show me this? I asked Orpheon. though I could not stop watching my own fast hands, the way I wrapped cord around a baby's neck not to pull but to slacken it, like loosening a knot in a necklace without breaking it. "You have forgiven one Thomas over and over in the shape of different men," Orpheon said. "Skill is not a substitute for discernment. Compassion without boundaries is a net with a hole. You carried his fear into lifetimes and called it your work to hold it. You are tired because you are doing two jobs, yours and his, and calling it love. Did I die there?" Orpheon paused. The river midwife did not die by drowning, as my bones had predicted. She died at 32, sepsis after a thorn pierced her palm as she picked a rose to bring to a laboring mother, proof that irony is older than language. They laid her by the river. The cloth still wrapped her left shoulder in July. Room 2. The Frost and the Fire. Norway, 1541. Snow like shattered glass. A brush of aurora across a sky that had been awake too long. I was a boy, Jakob, 17 and certain. My father carved altars. I carved the spaces between antlers and called it art. I had a sister, Lisbeth, with hair the color of new wheat and a laugh that shook snow from branches. We stole wood from the church to keep our mother's fingers from turning blue and our father's cough from producing blood. A priest with soft hands and a hard mouth called it a sin and called Lisbeth a witch because she did not lower her eyes when he spoke. They took her in the night. I went with a knife I did not know how to use. The rope around her wrists was tied in a sailor's knot. I had never been to sea, but my fingers knew how to undo it. I cut her free. We ran. They caught me, not because I was slow, but because shame makes you stumble. The first blow landed on my left shoulder with the force of a man proving something to himself. A belt, a buckle edge. I fell, and the snow went red in a halo around my face. They did not kill me. They wanted me to watch what they did to my sister. That was the kind of lesson men taught when they were afraid of girls who didn't bow. I carried Lisbeth in my arms after, pieces of her a puzzle I could not solve with winter hands. I held her in a barn and sang a hymn our mother had taught us. She died with the word home on her lips, unsure whether she meant our mother's hearth or a place beyond that even hymns couldn't point at. "Your shoulder," Orpheon said, "and your conviction that you must be strong enough to carry the body and the blame." The ache in my current left shoulder pulsed in sympathy, centuries collapsing into a single tendon. My breath stuttered. I tasted iron. Room 3. The Water and the Child. Veracruz, 1978. Heat again, but this time ocean. Salt crusting on eyelashes like fairy dust. I was 4. A girl. Tiny bones and knees like cherries. My mother had 3 jobs and a laugh like a spoon clinking glass. A wave I didn't understand could be that strong took me by the calves and asked if I would like to see what blue looks like from the inside. I said yes without words and then realized yes meant I could not breathe. Hands plucked me out, another mother, not mine, and smacked my back like trying to wake a stubborn radio. Water left my lungs like a small river deciding to go home. I didn't tell anyone that while I was inside the blue I heard singing. Not English, not Spanish, older. A language like whales and wind, it said, "When you're ready." "Ready for what?" I asked Orpheon, child Elena still coughing in my mouth. "To stop fearing the element that once held you," it said. "You do not fear water, you fear surrender." Room 4, The Knife and the Oath, Delhi, 1023. Incense smoke braided with dust. A courtyard that had learned to keep secrets. I was a surgeon, another kind of midwife, when knives were sacred and blood was a conversation with God. I took an oath I had no words for then, but could feel in my hands. To cut only when cutting saved, to never make an incision where breath could do the work first. I could unhook a stuck shoulder in a breach with a twist learned from watching wrestlers. I could drain a lung by listening to the music of fluid with my ear pressed to a chest. I died in my bed at 60, my left shoulder throbbing in weather changes, my wife rubbing oil into it and scolding me for letting it go too long before I asked for help. "You hear by touch," Orpheon said. "You see by feeling. You have always been the one who finds the vein in the dark." Room 5, The Fire and the Book, Cordoba, 1258. A library, the smell of leather and rain inside stone. I was a copyist, a woman dressed as a man because women were not allowed to hold the words that told the world how it worked. I learned that ink can be a weapon and a balm. I wrote a sentence in the margin of a banned text that changed a man's life 300 years later. I never met him, didn't need to. Language is a bridge that doesn't require you to see the face at the other end. Why do I keep choosing care? I asked Orpheon, midwife, surgeon, nurse, scribe. Even the boy who failed his sister, he tried to save her. Because your core is not a profession, it is a posture. You are a door opener. You came to usher breath into bodies, knowledge into minds, remembrance into fear. Door opening wears different clothes in different centuries. And karma, I asked, bracing my ribs against a word often misused to mean cosmic punishment. What did I do wrong to keep getting pain in the same place, men with the same wound, rooms where my hands are never enough? Karma is not a judge, Orpheon said. It is gravity. Unlearned lessons curve space-time. Until you learn, your path bends in the same direction. It lifted its hand again. And there is a shortcut. I knew the word before it landed. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is not letting the wolf keep the sheep, Orpheon said before I could protest. Forgiveness is removing your throat from its mouth and refusing to believe your blood is his dinner. Forgiveness is returning the story. I must carry what is not mine to the library and choosing a new one. What about Thomas? I asked, thinking of the man whose fear I mistook for devotion, and every man like him across centuries who found me because my door was always propped open. You do not owe any man the debt of your nervous system, Orpheon said, and I laughed. Ugly sob laughed because no one had ever said that to me in any language in any lifetime. What do I do with all of this when I go back? I asked. It felt presumptuous to assume there would be a back, but Orpheon had spoken of paused bodies like pause isn't stop, and there was still a Sophia in a room that smelled like chlorhexidine yelling at a code cart drawer to behave. Now you take 3 things, Orpheon said, and each landed like a stone in a river where I would later build a bridge. 1. Memory is layered. When you are overwhelmed by a feeling that doesn't match the facts of the room you're in, ask whose layer it is. Personal, ancestral, species, soul. Locate it, and the wave will pass without drowning you. 2. Karma is momentum, not a prison. Momentum can be redirected by a choice repeated with devotion, not once, not twice, as ritual. In this life, your ritual is boundaries. 3. Forgiveness collapses loops, not the kind you say with your mouth while your bones still panic, the kind you practice with your body until the story rewires. You will write a letter to Thomas, not the man you loved at 29, but the pattern of him across time, and you will not send it. You will burn it in a sink. Smoke is a script the nervous system reads. And proof? I asked. Skepticism was not only my profession, it was my guardian against nonsense. If I tell people I was a midwife in Savannah in 1864 and a boy named Jacob in Norway and a copyist in Cordoba, I'll sound like I inhaled too much isopropyl. You asked for anchors, Orpheon said, and in the word I felt the click of fate becoming choice. I will give you enough thread to pull. It showed me a cemetery in Savannah, a stone with my maiden name spelled M-A-E-V-E, the tail of the E chipped so it looked like a C. It showed me an address, Habersham or Habush. My consciousness snagged on the second half the way a hangnail catches on linen. It showed me a midwife's ledger with my cramped handwriting, accounts of molasses paid for services rendered, a sketch of a left shoulder with a note, pain, worse, in damp. It showed me a Norwegian parish registry entry that wasn't supposed to exist because they burned the records in a church fire in 1603, but in a trunk in a barn, someone had tucked a copy. Jacob Halverson, SIS Lisbeth. An annotation in the margin in a different hand, taken by men of the cloth. It showed me a birthmark on my current left shoulder shaped like a comma, the same as the scar on Maeve's, the same place the belt had landed on Jacob, the same pain that winter stitched into my fascia like a private joke. Why me? I asked. Why show me this if many don't remember? You are a door opener, Orpheon said again, as if repetition is a lock-picking. You work where souls arrive and where they leave. You needed to remember so you could stop believing that every door is yours to stand in. You will teach the ones who think their empathy is their job that their limits are holy. The darkness brightened without light. The ICU swam back through a membrane. Sound returned like teeth clicking. Someone yelled my name. Sophia said, "Come on, Nena, don't you dare." The shock paddles flashed, and for a fraction of a second I felt every birth I had ever attended, every first breath hitch like a hiccup before choosing life. Then my heart did what hearts do when they are not ready to rest. It beat. I slammed into my body like a bird into a window. Pain exploded, vision pixelated and reassembled. The second hand on the clock stuttered its way across the 12 like it was struggling through wet sand. "She's back," someone said, as if I had gone somewhere I needed announcing from. Later, when my map was a number you don't have to squint at, and my lactate stopped climbing like a mountain goat, Sophia sat on the edge of my bed and said, "You floated." "I know." She blinked tears she pretended were an allergy. "Tell me something you couldn't know." "The code cart's third drawer sticks because the lock is bent." She smirked. "Please, every nurse knows that. And your left shoelace was untied." She looked down at the shoe she had retied 3 hours before, and then back at me with a face that said, "Not bad." "What else?" "The clock's second hand doesn't sweep. It ticks. You have meant to tell maintenance for 3 weeks and never do." Her lip quivered. "What else?" "You said, 'Not on my watch,' and then mumbled in Spanish, 'No en mi turno, carajo.' And I'm telling Dr. Halim you speak perfect Spanish even though you lie and say you only understand the cuss words." She laughed. Then she cried in a way that nurses cry, throat-locked, sound-caught, tears escaping anyway. "I saw someone," I said, "because even now there are words you release into rooms like doves and hope they don't get shot down. A guide." "You died for 6 minutes," she said, half scolding, half awe. "Tell me later. Tell me everything later. For now, sleep." Anchors and proof. It's one thing to see a headstone in a vision. It's another to find it in a place you've never been. 2 months after I was discharged, I flew to Savannah on my only week off I've taken without getting sick. I didn't tell anyone why, not even my therapist, who deserved better but would get a book later. I rented a bike. I got lost on purpose. Colonial Park Cemetery is where the city keeps old bones and older stories. The air smelled like sermons and rain. I wandered until my feet led my eyes to it. Not the stone. I would have needed a map for that. The tree. A live oak, whose roots held the ground the way grief holds the chest. Firm, unyielding, patient. At its base, Maeve O'Rourke, the tail of the E chipped like a broken fingernail. Habersham Street ran not 3 blocks away. The ledger was harder. The Georgia Historical Society has an archive climate-controlled like a NICU. A kind librarian with hands that could have been mine handed me a reproduction of Midwives' Logs, 1860-1867. Maeve's entries were not signed. Women didn't then. But her handwriting and mine share a slant like 2 cousins, both taught by an aunt with rulers. On the last page, a sketch of a shoulder with an X on the deltoid. "Worse in damp," in a hand that did not know it was writing to a woman watching a desert monsoon in 2024. Norway required money and a miracle. I had 1.5 of each. Email can be a miracle when it arrives in the right mailbox. A parish historian in Telemark responded to a message I almost didn't send. "We lost many records in the 1603 fire," he wrote, "but a farmer's family kept a duplicate register. You might be the person it's meant for." He sent a photograph. The ink had browned to the color of tea. Jacob Halverson. Sister. Lisbeth. Different hand, margin note. Taken. I pressed my fingers to the screen and felt heat as if paper remembers hands. What this means and what it doesn't past life memory is not an excuse. I loved a Thomas in 1864 does not mean I must love a Thomas in 2025 who cannot hold his own fear without setting it on my table. I failed my sister in 1541 does not mean every woman is my sister and dying without me. I almost drowned in 1978 does not mean water is my enemy. It means surrender is not my enemy. Karma is not punishment. It is physics with feelings. Throw a ball and it arcs. Keep throwing the same way and it will keep arcing. Change your angle, change your grip, change your stance. Watch the curve rewrite. It takes practice. That's why souls incarnate. Practice takes time and freedom to fail. Forgiveness is not a door opened to wolves. It is a door closed with love to yourself, and then opening a window to let the wolf out. I wrote the letter to Thomas. I wrote it to all of them. I wrote it to myself. I forgive you for thinking you were food or savior, I wrote. I return what is not mine, I keep what is. I burned it in my sink and my fire alarm did not go off because sometimes the universe is on your side with small mercies. Memory is layered. The day after Savannah, I had a panic attack in a bathtub. Not because water is evil, because my 4-year-old lungs remembered a lesson my 34-year-old lungs had outgrown. I put my hand on my sternum and said, personal layer, old story, ancestral layer. We did drown once 2 great-grandfathers ago on a crossing no one wanted. Species layer, water is power and power is unpredictable. Soul layer, surrender is safe here. My heart slowed when it realized we weren't in the Gulf of Mexico and there was no mama asleep on the sand. Language matters even when you are speaking to bone. What I did with it, and what you can. I went back to work. I didn't quit and become a past life regression therapist. ER is still my church. Blood is still a conversation I know how to lead. But I added a new protocol that wasn't in the hospital's intranet. I call it the DOOR protocol, and it's 2 parts medicine, 1 part soul. Door 1. Before I walk into a trauma room, I ask, whose layer am I about to carry? If it's mine, I breathe and leave it at the threshold. If it's the patient's, I take the part that is medicine and leave the part that is story for them when they're ready. Door 2. When a family is losing someone, I speak to the part of them that is older than grief. Memory is layered, I say in plain English, because metaphors can be medical equipment too. What hurts right now belongs to all of your layers. That's why it feels bigger than this room. It doesn't mean you're crazy, it means you're connected. Door 3. When a patient wakes from a code and says, I saw a light, I don't smile the smile that says, I'm humoring you because shock. I say, tell me everything. If they talk about a librarian made of starlight, I do not tell them my librarian's name. I let them name their own guide. Libraries are local and universal both. I also started a project on my off days with a local historian and 2 chaplains, one Catholic who believes in saints and one Buddhist who believes in breath. We help people research strange personal echoes, birthmarks shaped like continents that match scars on ancestors, nightmares that map onto migrations, inexplicable skills that show up without practice. Not to prove anything to anyone who doesn't want it. To relieve people who are haunted by their own patterns and need a way to touch them without drowning. What I tell people who ask for proof. I show them the shoelace, the clock, the code cart drawer. I show them the Savannah stone and the ledger entry and the Norwegian register with ink older than most nations. I show them my shoulder. I ask them about theirs. I tell them that veridical details, things you can verify after you come back, matter because truth is kind to frightened brains. But I also tell them not to choke on proof. There are truths that heal whether or not you can file them in a court. Why you're hearing this now? Because you asked. Not with a comment under a video, though those help the algorithm. You asked with your life, with the way you keep dating the same person in different shoes, with your fear of cats that makes no sense until you remember your head was measured for bumps in a city where cats were burned with women who spoke out of turn, with your talent for picking up languages like you're remembering them, with your kid who plays Chopin at 5, like his fingers are taking dictation from a self who lived in Paris when roofs were heated with coal. You asked, and the library answered. What you can do tonight. If you have a pattern that scares or confuses you, sit at the edge of your bed and say out loud, memory is layered. Ask, whose layer is this? Don't force an answer. Let one land. Trust your first whisper more than your 10th argument. If there's a person whose face shows up across your life wearing different names, write them a letter, not to send, to burn. Name what is yours to carry and what isn't. Keep the letter's ashes in a jar for a week. Every time you reach for your phone to text them, shake the jar and ask, Do I need to carry this right now? Watch your nervous system learn a new trick. If there's a body ache that returns like a season, put your hand on it and ask, is this mine, my mother's, my species, or my soul's? You may cry. Crying is your fascia turning on the sprinklers. Let it rain. Then take a hot shower. Heat tells muscle it is not in Norway. If you don't believe any of this, bless that part of you. Skepticism kept our ancestors alive. Ask for anchors, then go about your life. Anchors show up like strange Google results in archives you didn't know existed. The hook. You came for between life and death. In a room that smells like bored angels and betadine, a cosmic librarian showed me a wall with doors. Each door was me. Each me was a bead on a thread I had mistaken for a single necklace. The secret wasn't that I had been other people. The secret was that I am a continuous intention trying on different bodies until the lesson lands in all the layers. If you came here for entertainment, I hope you were entertained. If you came here because your shoulder hurts in the rain and no MRI can tell you why, I hope you found a door. If you came here because you lost someone and wonder if they are still somewhere to be found, I hope you heard the song in the blue. Drop your echoes in the comments. The ones you can't explain, the ones you've dreamed, the ones your grandparents whispered over rice cookers and coffee. Someone reading will recognize your pattern and feel less alone. Subscribe if you want more stories from the seam. Not because I have all the answers, because I have a library card and a willingness to say when the same book keeps checking me out. And if tonight you hear singing in a language that isn't one you know, say, when I'm ready. The door is patient. The librarian never sleeps.